Hello again. I'm sure that most viewers must have noticed how Joe Biden has woken up and begun talking very tough indeed about the Middle East and sending an aircraft carrier to moor off the Israeli coast. In Britain, Rishi Sunak has similarly thrown himself into the fray and says that he is entirely on Israel's side. There are reports that Britain is about to send their own aircraft carrier, the Queen Elizabeth, to the Mediterranean as a bit of sabre rattling on behalf of Britain. It's all very heartening, of course, but why are both Britain and the United States suddenly so gung-ho when they are usually urging restraint on both sides in a conflict? The answer is, of course, that both leaders are facing elections next year, and both are wondering if appearing to be tough guys and shuffling aircraft carriers around might make them look like strong leaders. For the Americans, there are American hostages being held in the Middle East. On previous occasions when American hostages have been taken in that region, Iran in the late 1970s, obviously, there was humiliation for America, and the nation appeared powerless. Imagine what a coup it could be for Biden if he could rescue the American hostages currently being held in Gaza. Then too, the Americans know that Iran is behind this mischief and that they are also on the verge of being able to build nuclear weapons. Sooner or later, America and Israel might have to act to prevent that happening. Why not now? There have long been plans for a joint operation by the two countries to take out the Iranian nuclear facilities. For Rishi Sunak, who is an unpopular, weak and useless Prime Minister, there is of course the incentive of Margaret Thatcher's example. In 1981 she was the most unpopular Prime Minister the country had ever seen and looked as though she was heading to certain defeat in the next election. 2 years later, though, in 1983, she won a landslide victory, which all but annihilated the Labour Party. What happened to revive her fortunes? Why, the retaking of the Falkland Islands and the war with the Argentines. That's what. Everybody loves a wartime leader. I wonder if Sunak isn't thinking about some way to pull off a similar piece of work, if it might mean a quick little war with a clear victory. I was certainly surprised to see how tough Joe Biden was making himself appear in his latest speech. He didn't fall over or doze off and actually looked quite impressive. In the same way, I didn't expect to see Rishi Sunak go beetling off to a synagogue and declare his support for Israel and even to assert that there are not two sides to this dispute. The mood both here and in the United States is definitely militant. Of course, the downside to this, the drawback if you like, is that Iran is Russia's biggest ally at the moment and supplying them with drones and so on for use in the war in Ukraine. Then too, Russia has a naval base at Latakia on the coast of Syria, and the possibility of American, British and Russian warships jostling each other in the eastern Mediterranean is not really an appealing one, especially since we're not exactly on good terms with the Ivans at the moment. The problem with using a war in the Middle East in this way to further your own domestic interests is that it can also easily spiral out of control. There's already one intractable war going on in Eastern Europe, and I'm not at all sure of the wisdom of getting mixed up in another one, particularly one where the Russians also have their interests. Syria is now, and has been for the last half century or so, a client state of the Russians. Last night, Israel was exchanging mortar and artillery fire with Syrian positions. Add to the fact that Turkey also has de facto control of large parts of northern Syria and is conducting its own war there, the scope for mishap and disaster seems to me to be very great. I would have said offhand that Rishi Sunak had plenty of problems he might be dealing with in Britain without worrying his head too much about what's happening in the Middle East. I can't answer for the United States, but I dare say that Joe Biden has things there that he could be fixing rather than spending his time thinking about just how many aircraft carriers he might have anchored off Israel. I remarked the other day that all the pieces are in place lately for a world war to begin, and I rather think that the less posturing and sabre rattling by the Western powers at the moment, the better for all of us.